This story is about a righteous daughter-in-law who satisfyingly put her rude sister-in-law in her place for mistreating and exploiting a kind mother-in-law. What happened? Let's find out together. Before we start, please like and subscribe. It really supports our channel.
Hello. I'm a woman in my 30s, married for 3 years now, and I consider myself to have married well. I have a tender and attentive husband, and in-laws who shower me with endless love. When I first decided to marry, I was worried because of all the talk about in-law problems. Even in my family, my mom suffered harsh treatment from my grandmother and aunts, though my dad has since reflected on this and treats my mom well. I was afraid I might experience the same. However, my in-laws were different from the start, especially my mother-in-law, who said, "A daughter-in-law can never be like a real daughter." At first, this statement shocked me. I wondered if it meant she wanted to keep her distance, or that I wasn't really part of the family. But my mother-in-law truly lived by her words. Even after 3 years of marriage, she never interferes in our household. If there's something she doesn't like, she gently and smilingly talks to my husband about it. As a daughter-in-law, I've received nothing but love by simply doing my part. The concept of a daughter-in-law's duty varies from person to person, but my mother-in-law has a slightly different take on it. She believes it's enough for a daughter-in-law to show her face on important occasions and to be respectful to elders. She accepts that a daughter-in-law might not be able to do everything perfectly, since she isn't her biological child and therefore cannot be taught by her. It seems my mother-in-law respects the upbringing given by the daughter-in-law's own family. From a daughter-in-law's perspective, she's a wonderful mother-in-law. My husband thinks the same. Like any other couple, we have our disagreements, but we never fight over in-law issues. We consider ourselves lucky for that and support each other well. On the other hand, my father-in-law is rather sensitive, but not in the usual way. He has his own set of rules. For example, if he tells my mother-in-law to iron a shirt for the next day, it absolutely must be done. If it's forgotten even once, there's trouble. He's not one for understanding or compromise. This has led my kind and gentle mother-in-law to become even more subdued, both towards her own children and her daughters-in-law. By the time I married, my husband's younger brother was already married. My husband and I are the same age. His brother is 2 years younger, and his brother's wife is 3 years older than us, making her 5 years older than her husband. The first time we met, I didn't get a good impression of her, but I let it go. When my husband introduced me to his brother and sister-in-law, she seemed to challenge me subtly. I said, "We're going to be family, so let's get along." "Nice to meet you." She laughed and said, "We'll see. It would be nice to become family." I'm not one to back down, so I responded seriously. "What did you say?" She couldn't say anything and just avoided eye contact. Only my husband and his brother, who both have the same temperament as their mother, tried awkwardly to lighten the mood, but to no avail. The meeting ended on a sour note. Until we got married, she subtly asserted her seniority in the family. She didn't hesitate to express this in front of my in-laws, and I felt a confrontation was inevitable. However, each time, my mother-in-law would step in to smooth things over, leaving me no choice but to hold my tongue. Ultimately, we got married. I've regretted not setting clear titles and boundaries from the start. My sister-in-law would call me brother, but then mix informal and formal speech, even giving orders in a commanding tone. I thought she fundamentally lacked manners. If it were up to my usual self, I would have confronted this long ago, but family matters are delicate, and it wasn't easy to address. Eventually, several incidents led to a full-blown conflict between us. One day, I called my mother-in-law, who mentioned my sister-in-law was also planning to visit. So, I decided to go as well. Upon arriving, I learned she had already left after having lunch, claiming she had errands to run. I went into the kitchen, thinking of catching up with my mother-in-law after a quick meal. To my surprise, I found the dishes still piled up. I asked, "Mom, did she leave without doing the dishes?" She just laughed it off, saying, "Don't worry about it. Sit down. I'll make you some delicious noodles," and insisted I not bother. Despite my frustration, I sat down and focused on enjoying the noodle my mother-in-law made, even though she had already had lunch with my sister-in-law. She sat with me, asking, "Is it good? Want more side dishes?" While I appreciated her kindness, I couldn't help feeling angry because of my sister-in-law's actions. When I got home, I told my husband about what happened. After thinking it over, he said, "If you step in, it might just make my mom look more foolish. How about we just watch how things go for a bit longer?" I had to agree. He had a point. Honestly, just the thought of seeing my sister-in-law made me angry. So I avoided meeting her as much as possible. Then, kimchi making season came around. My mother-in-law is known for her delicious kimchi, and she planned to make a large batch, so my husband and I both took time off to help at his family's home. We were a bit nervous since we were going to make enough for both daughters-in-law's families, but also looking forward to it. The cost was split between our family and my brother-in-law's family, and we had ordered everything from the ingredients to the kimchi containers. When we arrived at the in-laws, only my brother-in-law was there. My sister-in-law hadn't come. When I asked him, "So, my sister-in-law didn't come?" he looked hesitant before saying, My wife must have forgotten today was kimchi making day. She had a business trip scheduled and couldn't make it." I couldn't help but laugh, and said loudly enough for anyone to hear, "A business trip on kimchi making day? What a coincidence, such a coincidence." My mother-in-law, husband, and brother-in-law all looked a bit shocked. But I didn't mind. Honestly, I didn't feel it was unfair that I had to do the kimchi making by myself as the only daughter-in-law present, standing in front of my mother-in-law, who was sweating profusely as she promised to even take care of my parents' share. I couldn't harbor any resentment. However, I found it unforgivable how my sister-in-law, knowing my kind-hearted mother-in-law, took advantage of her. That day, we also made delicious boiled pork to enjoy after the kimchi making. It wasn't a bad atmosphere, especially after my father-in-law came home from work and rewarded us for our hard work. but it didn't feel right to let things slide, so after dinner, I approached my mother-in-law and said, "Mom, I need to have a word with my sister-in-law. You know I've been holding back a lot, right?" She didn't say anything, just held my hand and comforted me. While cooling down a bit after sharing some stories, I still expressed my intentions firmly. One day, my husband and I secretly went to visit his parents' house. My family had sent us a lot of abalones to share, and it seemed like a good idea to enjoy them together at his parents' house because of the abundance. My husband said he'd look for a parking spot and told me to go up first. As I got off the elevator, I was immediately met with the loud sounds of an argument echoing through the narrow hallway. I was worried that my in-laws might be arguing, so I listened at the front door and recognized my sister-in-law's voice. Curious about the reason for the argument, I entered the code and went in. They seemed surprised to see me, probably not expecting me at that time. My mother-in-law was sitting on the couch, and my sister-in-law was standing up, clearly upset. Annoyed, I asked, "Why are you yelling at Mom like that?" My sister-in-law just said, "You don't need to know," and left. I was really upset and asked what happened. Apparently, my sister-in-law had come over earlier because she was invited for dinner. My mother-in-law had quietly covered her with a blanket as she was dozing off on the couch. For some reason, this startled my sister-in-law, who then yelled at my mother-in-law, "Why do you do things nobody asked you to do? You scared me." Although my mother-in-law said it was okay, I couldn't let it go. To lighten her mood, my husband and I made a simple but tasty lunch, and we all took a nap in the afternoon, waiting for the rest of the family to gather. In the evening, when my father-in-law and brother-in-law came home from work, my sister-in-law arrived as well. We didn't say anything at first and just enjoyed a hearty meal of abalone samgyetang we had brought. After dinner, we started eating fruit together. That's when I lost it, thinking my sister-in-law was oblivious to the issue. I confronted her, "Sis, can you explain what happened earlier today?" Everyone looked at me as if wondering what was going on. My sister-in-law, acting clueless, replied, "What are you talking about?" Which really made my blood boil. Tired of the tension and the pretense, I blurted out, "You screamed and threw a fit when Mom covered you with a blanket while you were napping earlier. I heard everything when I came in. Are you trying to deny it now? You've been disrespecting and mistreating Mom in the absence of the rest of the family. What kind of behavior is that?" My husband and brother-in-law were equally perplexed, asking, "What's going on here? Honey, did you really do that?" The atmosphere turned awkward. My sister-in-law kept denying everything. So to clear the air, I sternly warned her, "Sis, if you ever disrespect Mom again when no one else is around, you'll have me to answer to. Everyone here, just stay out of it." My sister-in-law left in tears, and my brother-in-law reluctantly followed her out and didn't come back. I felt sorry for showing such a scene in front of my in-laws, so I apologized to them. But honestly, I felt relieved inside. My father-in-law scolded my mother-in-law, "Why didn't you tell me about this? Are you being foolish?" It seemed he was upset because he was concerned. It's been about 1.5 years since that incident, and since then, My sister-in-law has been very polite to me, using formal language. I also make sure to use formal language with her, as I believe it's important to show respect to someone older. After that, for a few months, I made my mother-in-law promise to always let me know if my sister-in-law was coming over. You must tell me, it's very important. Whenever I got the message that she was coming, I'd rush over to my in-laws' place to watch her like a hawk, making sure she wouldn't mistreat my mother-in-law again. It seems my vigilance scared my sister-in-law a bit. She started being more cautious and treating my mother-in-law with respect. Of course, people's true natures don't change overnight. If I weren't around, she'd probably still take her frustrations out on my mother-in-law. As much as my mother-in-law seems to like me, I'd also like to change my father-in-law's habit of nitpicking and scolding her over nonsensical things. I worry that one day I might lose my temper and turn everything upside down.
Maybe it needs to be turned upside down. Perhaps people like us are needed to cleanse and refresh the world, right? Next in line should be my father-in-law. Who hasn't been considerate of his kind wife? Keep fighting the good fight. Ha ha.